You're listening to the Author Inside You podcast, a weekly podcast designed to motivate you to finish writing a book, choose a publisher, and have your work build an audience. Keep listening if you're looking to get propelled into the next chapter of your life. And now, it's the Author Inside You podcast with your host, Leah and Matt Rafferty.
Hello, and welcome to the Author Inside You podcast. I'm Matt Rafferty.
And I'm Leah Rafferty.
Joining us today is Kane McBeth, author of the mystery thriller 10 Mile Creek. Welcome, Kane. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Well, Kane, why did you become interested in writing mysteries?
It's funny. And I guess it is kind of a mystery. I kind of described it as a mystery, a mystery thriller laced with a little bit of horror, because I can't make up my mind, But I grew up just loving, those types of stories, whether it be Stephen King or something on the Twilight Zone or H.P. Lovecraft, Edgar Allan Poe. And, eventually your brain warps enough till you get to the point and think, hey, maybe I can try that as well. So I guess it's mystery in the sense that Poe was mystery, but not necessarily in the sense like a classic Sherlock Holmes solve it type mystery.
So when you started writing it, did you come up with an outline and say, I'm going to have this many characters and this is the basic storyline?
Actually, it came about, it's kind of a strange way it came about. A few years before I wrote the book, I got involved, my wife and I actually got involved in the genealogy. I think a lot of people are kind of getting involved in that with the ancestry stuff. And we started to dig and we got obsessed, of course. And, it's like this grand, generational scavenger hunt. And we started going through and, of course, I like to collect things. So I had to collect as many pictures of ancestors as I could and gravestones. We wanted to find the burial place of everybody.
Oh.
And some are easy to find, and some are like trading cards. They're really rare. We used to take our kids to cemeteries when they were young and give them $1 because they could find all the people. I mean, it's kind of long story short, because I could talk about genealogy a lot, but basically it came down to about 7 or 8 generations out. I could find the burial place of every single ancestor of mine, with the exception of one.
Wow! And
that's a whole other conversation. But let's just say, I've talked to professional genealogists. I've tried. I mean, this is years and years and years, and this truly is a mystery. And I'm not sure I'll ever solve what happened to my great 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 grandmother Lydia. But in the process, I kind of felt like I needed to come up with a way of explaining it, maybe just for myself, just trying to fill in the blanks. And I kind of came up with a sinister way. But, the story just kind of came into my head. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I doubt that's what happened to her, but maybe it did. And it was a fun way to explain it. So that's kind of where the seed grew. And I just kind of came up with some characters to center around the idea. And it kind of went from there.
Wow, your relatives from before did not realize how they would be guiding you in your future.
Right.
That's
exactly.
Pretty cool.
So you wrote a family history, sort of.
Yeah, well, and there's a lot of stuff that's actually, somewhat autobiographical, because there is actually a house that I discovered in Washington, Pennsylvania, that's pre-Revolutionary War. It's just a shell of a house now, but still there on the land. And there is a little cemetery on the plot that's very difficult to get to, but it has relatives of mine back to the late 1700s. And I kind of tied the two together. I thought, what if there was a teacher couple who happened to inherit this house because they were next of kin, but had no idea that it even existed. And they decided to kind of go off the grid for the summer, fix it up, take their daughter and, basically not live off the land, but just restore this house. And, when they get there, kind of strange things begin to happen. And this character gets obsessed with his genealogy. And of course, there's one person he can't find, and it kind of goes from there. So it kind of parallels my journey, but in a more fictitious way.
I think that's a really interesting story. And we saw, when we were looking at Amazon, we were able to see that you have a lot of reviews. And one person said they want a sequel.
Yes, and I actually have a sequel kind of in mind. It's kind of outlined. It's just, it's the time to devote to it. I'm kind of an all-in or nothing kind of guy. So if I devote to run a marathon, or if I devote to starting a podcast, or I want to, write a novel, everything else kind of shuts down. So I have to prepare everyone around me, and, I kind of just do that. So as soon as I get to that point where I feel like it might be this winter, because, winters here in Ohio, there isn't a whole lot to do.
Right.
It might be a good time to knock this thing out.
So then you kind of just told us, what is your writing process?
Yeah, it's funny. I mentioned Stephen King, and he's one of my inspirations, and he does something that I can't do, and I doubt few writers can do, and that's just kind of start a story and just let it grow as he goes. And I think sometimes he suffers at the end. Sometimes the endings are a bit weak. Not all of them, but that's maybe one thing I'd criticize. I have to outline, and the hardest part for me is coming up with story. So I will take a lot of time just driving. I won't write anything down. I'll just develop a story in my head, develop these characters, begin to kind of play it out in my head. And once I get to a certain point, I'm like, okay, I think I might have something here. Then I kind of start writing these things down, and it begins to take shape. But I used to teach writing a while ago, and I would tell my students, it's kind of like building a house. You don't want to just get some raw materials and start hammering away, because you're going to get $5,000 into it and realize, whoa, okay, didn't do that right.
That didn't work.
Tear it all down again, and it takes so much time and money. And so for me, if I can get the story and get the outline and get everything the way I want it, then it's kind of like plug and chug. And things still change along the way, and it's not exactly the same as my outline, but I feel like if I have this plan, I know it's going to get somewhere. The ending is going to be somewhat satisfying, at least for me. And I'm not going to be left with, months and months and months of time and nothing to show for it.
Well, that's impressive that you can think of the story in your head and then later on go back and remember it and write it down. I think that if I thought up a story, I'd have some characters in my head, and then by the time I got to the grocery store, I'd forget who the characters were and what the story was.
There's a lot of stories that circle around up there that nothing really happens, and sometimes they combine, and sometimes it just starts with a character and kind of goes from there. But yeah, I mean, it's just like finally something takes hold and kind of gets a little more space up there, and eventually I feel like, okay, maybe I should do something. But sometimes it's a short story, sometimes it's a novel idea, it just depends.
Right. So then when you wrote 10 Mile Creek, what was your process like? Was it just sitting down and writing 8 hours a day, or? I
actually wrote a screenplay of it first, believe it or not, because I've written a few screenplays too, and at the time I was kind of in that mode, and I thought, this might make a pretty cool movie. So I wrote the screenplay, and I showed a few people that I know, and they kind of liked the story. But you know how it's difficult to get anything made. Yeah. Sitting there on my shelf right now, but I thought, okay, well, I have this outline. Let me do something with it. Maybe this could be, because I, had never written a novel. I mean, I'd started many novels, just never had the discipline, never made the time. And I thought, okay, I already have the story here. I basically have the outline. So I'm just going to use this to guide the writing process. And I mentioned I'm a teacher, so I have the luxury of having the summer off, which is nice. Sure. And one summer I just thought, okay, I try to make a summer goal for myself, and my summer goal that summer was by the end of August I would have a completed novel.
Wow.
And so I'd start about sometimes it was 10 pages a day, sometimes I wasn't feeling it, sometimes I would write 4 or 5 hours and get locked in, and it just kind of depends. I don't have like a fast and hard rule for it, but it was an interesting process. But what really kept me going was accountability. I have a friend who, was gracious enough to agree to kind of read it as I wrote it. And so I'd finish a chapter and I would send it off to him, and he'd give me some feedback, and this process went on. And eventually I think I probably hit 4th of July and I kind of lost some steam and quit writing for about a week or so. And he wrote back, he's like, "You can't leave me hanging like this. I gotta know what happened."
I gotta know.
That's like, wonderful.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
So I continued writing and finished it. And I have him to really thank for that, because he kept me on task.
That's great. So when you were getting the feedback, were you going back and changing what he suggested, or were you just plowing forward to get it all completed and then go back?
I might make some small changes, or I just make some notes. So when I went back for my revision, I would catch them at that point. I can't remember if you found any major problems. I mean, of course, if there was something major going on, I'd have to kind of go back and fix. But
sure.
Since I had the screenplay finished and most of it worked pretty well, it was probably like minor things that I went back. It was more. He was very helpful, but it was more the accountability, just the fact that he kept writing and saying, okay, when's the next chapter? Gave me a reason to keep going.
And you got it done that summer.
Yeah, I did. I mean, it's not a long novel. It's like 260 pages, 60,000 words or something like that. But, it was doable, and I had the time. And like I said, the story was there. So you don't have to really worry about writer's block or anything, and kind of already gone through the process.
Well, congratulations, because just because you had the time doesn't mean that it would actually happen. So you actually had the drive to finish that.
Well, like I said, I get a little obsessed, like I do with the genealogy. So once I put my mind to something, usually I'm pretty stubborn about it, much to the chagrin of those around me. But,
Well, that's what's nice about people who actually accomplish their goals, I think, also, is that sometimes something possesses you. Like you said, it's in your mind and you have to get it out, right? It's like there is a purpose for this in my mind. I need to write it down and share it with others.
Yes, and that's the key there. You said share it with others, and that's been probably the best part of the entire process. I mean, really, writing isn't always fun for me. Coming up with the story is fun for me. If I get on a tear, like I said, and it was, it's just going, it's flowing, it's fun. But sometimes it's just like, I read some analogy that writing, once you've come up with your outline, is pretty much like, have a stack of logs over here and you pick the logs up and you walk through the side of the room and you drop them. And it's pretty much just back and forth. And sometimes it kind of felt like that too. And so when I was finished, I was kind of relieved. And then it's the idea of, okay, I'm going to show this to some people and see what they think. And, friends and family are very gracious. And even though you tell them, please be honest,
right.
They're going to.
Right.
So when I finally put it out there and published it and began to see reviews from strangers, complete strangers that really enjoyed the story, that was the vindication. And it's just a matter of, hey, I put something out there that somebody else enjoyed. They, enlightened their week, or they had a good beach read, or, it's not To Kill a Mockingbird. That was the joke. The subtitle of the book was Not To Kill a Mockingbird. This is just it's a fun, almost like B-movie, dime store type kind of pulp feel to it. It was just meant to be fun and to maybe be a little bit spooky and to kind of string people along. And that seems to be the reception that most people had. Not all of them. There are a few in there that didn't quite enjoy it, but I suppose you'll get that with any book.
Right.
Sure. There's anything that's going to get a negative review. It
seems like the majority of the people did like your book, and one person even compared your book to Stephen King.
Yeah, that made me feel pretty good. He said something to the effect of, which makes sense because that's like one of my biggest inspirations, and I read him all the time, so I'm sure a lot of that comes out on the page. But yeah, it feels good. I think it's not a huge sample size right now, but of the reviews that are there, I think Goodreads has close to 100, but it's still above 4. It's like 4.2. And so you kind of sit back and say, all right, right. I don't totally stick with this, and, people kind of enjoy it. So maybe I should write another one. Just got to get the drive back,
It seems like it, yeah.
No matter where you are in your writing process, we have a wonderful resource for you.
It's called Scribophile, and you can find it at scribophile.com.
So what is Scribophile? It is a place where you can post your writing and get detailed, insightful feedback from other writers on how to improve it. You can also chat and discuss with other writers around the world to see what they have to say about your work. We all know that networking is very important, and you'll be meeting like-minded writers.
And there's even fun writing contests where you can win great prizes. And you can educate yourself on the finer points on the craft of writing. There's a writing academy and a writer's blog. No matter your writing style or genre, there's a place for you on Scribophile.
The nice thing about Scribophile is that they give you detailed instructions on how their community works. You might feel overwhelmed with the writing process, but you're not going to feel overwhelmed by joining this community.
So if you're looking for beta readers or some critique of your work, check out Scribophile at scribophile.com. It's SCRIBOPHILE.com. Scribophile.com. Well, Kane, when you finished with the manuscript, did you hire an editor?
Actually, I did not. A lot of it I went back myself. I used to teach English, and I'm not a perfect grammarian, but I was able to catch a lot of stuff. But you can't catch everything. You know how it is. My wife was gracious enough to read it, and she made some notes. And I think I had a couple other English teacher friends that did. The biggest help, I think, was when I finally I put it on Amazon, and I got some draft copies. And I had a few friends and coworkers that were interested in reading it. And I said, okay, that's great. I got some copies for you. And here's a Sharpie. And as you go through it, if you see anything, a double word or misspelled word, something doesn't sound right, circle it. And I think there were 3 that I circulated. I probably had maybe 4 or 5 people that read through it. And then that was the next process, was going through each one of them and going through my, manuscript and making those changes. And so, it's probably not 100% clean, but it's probably pretty darn close at this point.
Oh, that's a very interesting how you had your beta readers. You got the rough drafts from Amazon. That's very interesting, I think.
Well, it's a little more exciting, I think, to read an actual book with a cover that looks like a book as opposed to, this huge stack of, printed pages. And so
sure, I agree.
I'm more likely to read it that way, which seems to be what happened. Now, if I write another one, do I go back to the same people or do I find new things?
Oh, it all depends if you were happy with your friends or not, right?
Right, exactly.
Well, Kane, how did you decide to self-publish your book?
Well, after I finished it, kind of sat on my computer for a little bit, And I thought, well, I need to do something with this. And again, I had no idea if anybody would really want to read it other than my friends. And I thought, well, I'll try to get an agent, because I've heard these days, I mean, if you don't have an agent, the New York publishers aren't even going to talk to you. Mm-hmm. And so, which makes sense, because, the agents kind of do the vetting for the publishing companies, and it kind of works for them. So I went through, I found an actual database online. It was kind of neat. You can go through and put the genres and so on, which kind of gave me a list to pare down. And then I sent some stuff out and got to know the agents as well as I could and what they represented. A lot of people never got back to me, and then there were some that got back to me and requested the full manuscript, and then there were, maybe 2 or 3 that came back and gave me feedback. None of them were interested. Well, one was interested, but she kind of wanted me to make a lot of major changes, and I just didn't. Maybe I was too lazy, or I was just happy with the way it was. Sure. And so I thanked her for her interest, and that's someone I might go back to at some point. But I finally, after about a year of doing that, I thought, I used to believe there was a stigma for self-publishing that's kind of like, well, if you're good enough, you can find a publisher. But then I began to realize that's not the case. And just like with music, you can put your stuff out there and you can find an audience, and you don't have to go through the traditional media. I mean, I think the watershed moment was when, I forget what movie it was, but there was a major movie with Matt Damon that had come out, and I found out that it was based on, and it was sold from a self-published book. And I thought, okay, so there's definitely some legitimacy in this. And so I thought, why not? Let's throw it out there. At least it gives me an opportunity to see what strangers might think of it. And so that's kind of when I went down that road. And when I found how simple it was, and it literally cost me nothing but my time, that was the key. I didn't have to put any money up front. I had all the tools to, upload and get the manuscript looking the way I want. It's kind of a different process with the ebook, and the ebook I did first, and that was out there for about 6 months. And it took me a while. I think it was maybe another summer that I spent, because with the paperback, you have to line up the gutters and the headings and the page numbers, and that was a whole new process. I had to learn a lot of printing stuff. I had to learn, and but then once I did that and got a lot of those copies back and proof those, and that was kind of fun too. But now if somebody wants, I buy some author copies and give them away. But if somebody really wants a physical copy, they can order one, have one too for their bookshelf.
From speaking to other authors, we are learning more and more that self-publishing seems to be the way to go, because you can have more control, you get more of a profit, and you're not waiting for someone else to say you're okay. You find your audience, and with more opportunities to find your audience, it's self-publishing seems to be the way to go right now.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I suppose maybe my line of thinking was, if I get a good enough response online, or I get a little following, which has not happened, but should that happen, now if I go to an agent, I can say, hey, I've written something or written a few things, and, I have people that, kind of like what I do, and, maybe you can give me a shot. But at this point, really, it's just, I just enjoy doing it. That's the most satisfying part, was just being able to hear feedback and, find out people enjoyed what I did.
And you're lucky to get feedback, because a lot of people we speak to do not even hear any feedback. So congratulations on that also.
I read somewhere that 1 out of every 100 that reads a book on Kindle will actually leave a response. So if that's the case, a lot of people apparently read the book.
That's great.
Just very nice. But also what's nice with the Kindle, not only do I have the ebook up there, but they have the Kindle Unlimited, which is kind of like the Spotify for books. I guess you pay a certain fee per month and you can read as many of those books. And again, my objective wasn't to make money, is just to kind of do something and get it out there. So I thought, hey, why not? I still get a percentage of the profit share or whatever, but it gives people an opportunity. And then they have the free promotions, which are great. So about every 3 months, I'll put it out there for free, and, I might get 500 people that day download it. And so I suppose I have a lot of reviews just because I've kind of flooded the market with availability.
Right. So I don't really know that much about the free unlimited or giving the book away on Amazon. How does that work?
Well, basically, you have to be exclusive with Amazon. So I can't put it on Barnes & Noble or some of the other sites, Moby or whatever. But you put it on, or Kobe, I think the name of it. Anyway, you put it on and you're exclusive to Amazon. So you basically promise not to sell it anywhere else. And then they give you certain tools. And one of the tools is, I think you get, in a 3-month period, I think they give you 5 days where you can give it away for free to kind of generate some buzz. And what's nice is when I do that, I actually get up in the rankings. I think last time I got number 6. I mean, it was a pretty, specific niche. It was like paranormal mystery, horror, something or other, and I was up there. But at least people saw it and downloaded it. So those are some tools. Now, I did take a time where I took it off Amazon, and I tried some of the other services like Barnes and Nobles and so forth. And I didn't have a whole lot of activity. So I figured, well, it seems the audience is there. I went back exclusive. But it's every 3 months you have the choice, either continue or renew it.
Great. And so is that your main mode of promotion?
Yeah, that and just some social media stuff. I have a Twitter and an Instagram and a Facebook, and I need to do a much better job of kind of just putting things out there to kind of stay in the consciousness of people that follow it. But, I can, like this podcast, I could put out there for people who follow, and I'll have a huge following.
We hope you
do. There is feedback. I got a response back to someone who actually lives in the town where the book is set, because it's actually based in a real place, which then really kind of made me paranoid, because I didn't expect anyone to even read this. I thought, oh my gosh, I hope I didn't offend anybody. I hope I got all the facts right and so forth. And they were very complimentary of the book. And I said, well, how did you even hear about it? And they said, well, their librarian actually came across it somehow, and she shared it on Facebook. And so a lot of people in this very small town are reading the book. And this was kind of strange, because I guess it's in their library, in this little library in this town in Pennsylvania. And the library is actually in the book. There's a librarian character in the book. So I thought it kind of comes full circle. It's kind of a strange, surreal. So now I have to go back and visit and see the book on the shelf and just kind of feel like, oh, that's kind of neat.
Well, they would probably be very anxious to have you come and speak or sign books.
Right, a book signing, a parade, something.
Yeah.
Not a parade.
Right. Yes, well, that's another thing that we authors tell us, is that the opportunities that you don't even think about open up. Like you just said, there's a library in Pennsylvania who has your book, and just let other people know about it. And I'm sure their town is very happy.
Well, Kane, what about somebody who's listening and thinking about writing a book? What kind of advice would you have for them?
Prepare for, a lot of work. It's not easy. I mean, inspiration is easy. I can't tell you how many novels I started, and wrote 15 pages in one sitting and thought, oh, this is great, and never went back to it again. These are all cliches, but they're true. Planning, once you get to that point where like I said, I have that point when I know, and you just got to start writing stuff down and keep that information organized and keep working through it. And it's kind of an instinctual thing. You'll kind of know when you feel like, hey, this is something we're putting time into. And then once you get to that point, it's just kind of a grind. It's not always a grind. Sometimes it's fun, but sometimes it's not. And I suppose it's like anything else, training for a marathon or going on a diet or learning a musical instrument. There are ups and downs. And that's why the accountability piece was key for me. So I would say find somebody whom you trust, who keep you accountable in kind of a fun way, and set a goal. Again, another cliche, but I set a goal. I said, I'm going to be finished, in 3 months before I go back to work. And I'm very stubborn. That's my personality. And so I was going to, do that no matter what. In fact, towards the end, I'd say halfway through the summer, I wasn't really that far into it. And I remember telling myself, I said I would finish it. I didn't say it had to be good, So then I just plowed through and finished it just so I could say I got it done. But what that did was allow me to not really judge so much and be so reluctant and just kind of put it out there.
Great advice.
Excellent.
Thank you. How can our listeners get in touch with you?
Macbeth Kane at gmail.com, Twitter at Macbeth Kane, Kane Macbeth on Facebook, and Kane.Macbeth on Instagram. And then, like I said, you can find the book on Kindle and Kindle Unlimited. And on Kindle, it's the ebook as well as the paperback version if you want a physical copy.
Great. And you can find all those links right in the show notes.
Excellent.
Well, Kane, thank you very much for being a guest today on the Author Inside You podcast. You brought a lot of great advice and some great stories, too. So thank you very much.
No problem. I really appreciate the opportunity.
You can find us on Facebook at The Author Inside You. We'd love to hear from you. Please leave a post and let us know what you think about our podcast.
Or you can go to theauthorinside.you.com and contact us there, too. It'd be great to hear from you. And until next time,
right on.
Thank you for listening to the Author Inside You podcast with your host, Leah and Matt Rafferty.